The citation showed up on my door at 7 in the morning, and I knew my life was about to get complicated. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, in a condo association called Oak Hollow Owners Association, the kind of place where every rule comes with 3 footnotes and a processing fee. I moved here 2 years ago because the rent was reasonable and I work remotely as a software developer, spending most of my day on video calls in my spare bedroom office. The HOA seemed annoying but manageable until this winter, when I started rebuilding my finances after a bad year and realized I could not absorb bogus fees. The notice was printed on official Oak Hollow letterhead, taped to my door with packing tape, and it accused me of street obstruction because I had piled snow near the curb after clearing my driveway. I stood there in my dark green puffer jacket and navy beanie, breath fogging in the cold, staring at the paper and wondering how snow on a public street could possibly be my problem. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos of the notice before I even touched it. The citation said I had 7 days to remove the obstruction or face a $200 fine, plus a $50 processing fee. It did not cite a specific rule number. It did not explain what qualified as obstruction. It just said I was in violation and I needed to comply immediately. I peeled the notice off my door and went inside, shaking snow off my boots onto the mat. My car battery had been struggling in the cold all month, and I could not risk being stranded during a confrontation, so I plugged in the block heater and made coffee while I thought about my next move. The snow pile was maybe 3 feet wide and 2 feet high, pushed up against the curb where every other neighbor had piled theirs. If this was a violation, half the street was guilty. I called the HOA office at 9 and got voicemail. I left a message asking for the specific rule citation and a copy of the winter policy. Then I called back at 10 and got voicemail again. At 11, I sent an email with the same request, attaching photos of my snow pile and 3 other identical piles on the same block. I stayed polite and professional because I knew anything I wrote could end up in front of a lawyer. By noon, I still had no response, so I decided to go to the clubhouse in person. I grabbed my jacket and beanie, unplugged the car, and drove the 2 blocks to the Oak Hollow Community Center, a low brick building with a faded sign and a parking lot that had not been plowed in days. The woman at the front desk told me the property manager was out until next week, and I should submit my question in writing. I told her I already had. She said she would make a note. I asked if I could see a copy of the winter policy, and she said it was not public. I asked how I was supposed to follow a rule I could not read, and she said all policies were distributed at the annual meeting. I had not received anything at the annual meeting. She shrugged and went back to her computer. I stood there for a moment, feeling the frustration build, then turned and walked out. On my way to the car, I saw a middle-aged woman with blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a teal parka and matching teal knit beanie, standing near the entrance with a plastic bin of winter rule packets. She was talking to another resident, gesturing sharply with her hands. I recognized her from the last board meeting. Her name was Jeanette Callahan, but everyone called her Sharon. She was the special assessment coordinator, which meant she had the authority to invent new charges and make my life hell. She saw me and waved me over. I hesitated, then walked back. She set the bin down on the snow-dusted bench and smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said she heard I had a question about the citation. I said I wanted the rule citation and a copy of the policy. She said the policy was clear and I should have read it before I violated it. I said I never received a copy. She said that was my responsibility, not hers. I asked where I could get one. She said the packets were for board members only. I pointed at the bin and said it looked like she had plenty of copies. She said those were for official use and she could not distribute them without approval. I asked who I needed approval from. She said the board, which met once a month. The next meeting was 3 weeks away. My citation was due in 7 days. I could feel the conversation turning into a loop, so I tried a different approach. I asked what specific code section I had violated. She said I knew what I did. I said I cleared my driveway like everyone else. She said I piled the snow in a way that obstructed the street. I said the snow was against the curb, not in the street. She said it was close enough to count. I asked if she had measurements. She said she did not need measurements because she knew the rules and she would make sure they were enforced. That phrase landed hard. I knew the rules and I would make sure they are enforced. She said it like a slogan, like something she had practiced. I filed it away and kept going. I asked if the city had confirmed the obstruction. She said the city had nothing to do with it. I said if the violation was on a public street, the city absolutely had something to do with it. She said I could rewrite the story any way I wanted, but the citation was valid, and I needed to pay the fine or remove the snow. I felt my jaw tighten. I could rewrite the story any way I wanted. That line was going to come back to haunt her, but I did not push it yet. I had already decided I was not paying the fine, and I was not moving the snow until I had proof it was actually illegal. I told her I would be in touch and walked back to my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, not from the cold but from anger. She was lying about the policy, lying about the city, and lying about the rules, and she was doing it with a smile. I needed evidence, and I needed it fast. The first thing I did was call City Code Enforcement. I got a recorded message with office hours and a number for non-emergency violations. I called the non-emergency line and explained the situation to the operator. She put me through to an inspector named Marcus, who listened to my story and then laughed. He said the HOA had no authority over snow placement on public streets, and any citation related to street obstruction had to come from the city. He said if the snow was not blocking a fire hydrant or a stop sign, it was legal. He asked if I wanted him to send me an email confirming that. I said yes, immediately. He said he would send it within the hour. I thanked him 3 times and hung up, feeling the first bit of relief I had felt all day. The email arrived 40 minutes later. It was short, professional, and perfect. It said Oak Hollow Owners Association had no enforcement authority over public right-of-way snow placement, and any complaints should be directed to the city. It included Marcus's name, title, and badge number. I printed 2 copies, saved the PDF to 3 different places, and forwarded it to my personal email as backup. Then I drafted a response to the HOA, attaching the email and requesting immediate withdrawal of the citation. I kept the tone calm, but firm. I sent it to the main office email and CC'd the board president and the property manager. Then I waited. 2 days passed with no response. On the 3rd day, I got a new notice in my mailbox. This one said my account was past due because I had not paid the citation, and I now owed an additional $50 late fee. It also said the HOA was holding my monthly payment in escrow pending resolution of the violation. I read it twice to make sure I understood. They were claiming I was delinquent, but they were the ones refusing to process my payment. It was circular logic designed to trap me in a paper loop. I took a photo of the notice, then called my bank to confirm my payment had been sent on time. It had. The bank showed it was cashed 3 days ago. I asked for a copy of the cleared check image and saved it to my records. I forwarded everything to Marcus at Code Enforcement and asked if the city could intervene. He said the city could not get involved in internal HOA disputes unless there was a public safety issue, but he could attend the next board meeting as a witness if I filed a formal complaint. I asked what that would require. He said I needed to document every interaction, every notice, and every payment, then submit a written complaint to the city and the HOA board at least 10 days before the meeting. He said if the HOA continued to harass me after that, I could file for a restraining order. I thanked him and started building my file. That night, I sat down and wrote a timeline of every event, every email, every phone call, every notice. I printed copies of the city email, the canceled check, the original citation, and the past due notice. I took photos of the snow pile from 4 different angles, showing the curb line and the street clearance. I saved everything in a binder with tabs and page numbers. It felt excessive, but I knew this was going to escalate, and I wanted to be ready. The next morning, Sharon showed up at my door. I was on a video call when I heard the knock, so I muted my mic and went to the window. She was standing on my porch with her plastic bin of winter rule packets, holding a blank notice in one hand and a pen in the other. She saw me through the window and waved. I shook my head and pointed at my headset. She knocked again, harder. I unmuted long enough to tell my team I had to step away for a minute. Then I opened the door halfway, keeping my body in the frame so she could not push past me. She said she was here to conduct a surprise inspection. I said I did not consent to any inspection. She said the HOA rules allowed inspections with 24 hours notice. I said she did not give me 24 hours notice. She said she sent an email yesterday. I said I never received it. She said that was not her problem. I said I was working and she needed to leave. She said she had the right to inspect for winter violations including icicles, and if I refused, she would cite me for non-compliance. I said show me the warrant. She blinked. I said if you want to inspect my property, show me the warrant. She said HOAs do not need warrants. I said then you do not get to inspect. She started to argue, but I closed the door and locked it. She knocked 3 more times, then I heard her boots crunching in the snow as she walked away. I went back to my call, but my hands were shaking. She had tried to intimidate me into letting her inside, and when that did not work, she threatened a compliance citation. It was harassment, plain and simple, and I needed to document it. I wrote down the time, the date, what she said, and how I responded. Then I checked my email. There was no inspection notice. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. She had lied about sending it. 2 hours later, I got a call from the property manager. She said there had been a complaint about my refusal to cooperate with an inspection. I said the inspection was not scheduled, I was not notified, and I had the right to refuse entry to my home. She said the HOA needed to verify compliance with winter safety standards. I said I would be happy to schedule an inspection with proper notice, but I would not allow surprise visits. She said she would note my response and get back to me. She never did. The next day, I found a new notice on my car windshield. This one said I was being fined an additional $100 for non-compliance with inspection requirements. It also said the HOA was filing a small claims case to recover all outstanding fees and processing costs. I stood there in the cold, reading the notice, and felt something shift inside me. They were not trying to enforce a rule. They were trying to bury me in paperwork until I gave up. I took a photo of the notice, then peeled it off my windshield and added it to my binder. I called Marcus again and told him about the inspection attempt and the new fine. He said it sounded like harassment and I should start documenting every interaction on video if possible. He said he would write a second email confirming that the HOA inspection policies did not override my right to refuse entry without proper notice. He sent it that afternoon. I printed it and added it to the binder. That weekend, I got a certified letter from a law firm representing Oak Hollow Owners Association. The letter said I owed $400 in fines and fees, and if I did not pay within 10 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property. I signed for the letter, took it inside, and read it 3 times. It was the escalation I had been expecting, and it was also the mistake I had been waiting for. Because I had proof in writing that I had cured the original violation by forwarding the city email, and the HOA had continued to fine me anyway. I had a chain of certified letters proving I had responded to every notice, requested clarification on every rule, and asked for withdrawal of the citation. The HOA had ignored all of it and kept piling on fees. That was bad faith, and it was exactly what I needed to prove harassment. I did not respond to the law firm directly. Instead, I sent a certified letter to the HOA board president, the property manager, and the law firm, attaching the full timeline, all the notices, the city emails, the canceled check, and a formal demand to withdraw all citations and fees. I included a copy of the state law on HOA harassment and noted that continued retaliation could result in a counterclaim for damages. I sent it with return receipt requested and kept copies of everything. 3 days later, Sharon called me. She said the board had reviewed my complaint and determined that I was still in violation. I asked what violation. She said the original citation for street obstruction. I said the city confirmed the HOA had no authority over street snow placement. She said the citation was for community standards, not city code. I said the citation specifically said street obstruction. She said I was misreading it. I said I had a copy right in front of me. She said the board stood by the citation and I needed to pay the fine. I said I was not paying anything until I saw the rule in writing. She said the rule was in the winter policy packet. I said I never received the packet and she refused to give me a copy. She said I should have picked one up at the meeting. I said I was never told the packets were available. She said that was not her problem. I took a breath and decided to push. I said it seemed strange that the policy was secret and the citations kept changing, and I wondered if the board had actually approved any of this. She went quiet for a moment, then said the board approved everything she did. I said I would like to see the board meeting minutes where they voted on my citation. She said the minutes were not public. I said board meeting minutes are required to be available to homeowners under state law. She said she would check with the attorney. I said I already checked with an attorney, and if the board minutes showed the citation was approved, I would drop my complaint. She said fine, she would send them. Then she hung up. I knew she would not send them, because I was starting to suspect the board had not approved the citation at all. Sharon was running her own enforcement campaign, and she was using her role as special assessment coordinator to invent charges and pocket the fees. It was fraud, and it was about to blow up in her face. The next week, I got an email from the property manager saying the board meeting minutes were not available due to ongoing legal review. I forwarded the email to my attorney and asked if that was legal. He said no, and he drafted a formal records request under state law, demanding all board meeting minutes for the past year, all financial records related to special assessments, and all correspondence between Sharon and the board regarding my citation. We sent it certified mail with a 10-day deadline. While I waited, I kept building my case. I went back through my bank records and found 3 other charges from Oak Hollow that I had not authorized. One was a $50 administrative fee from 2 months ago. Another was a $75 special assessment for snow removal that I had already paid through my monthly dues. The third was a $30 processing fee for a violation I never received notice of. I printed all the statements and added them to the binder. Then I called my bank and disputed all 3 charges. The bank said they would investigate and issue provisional credits while they reviewed the case. 2 days before the 10-day deadline, I got a call from a man who said he was the HOA board president. He said he had just learned about my citation and he wanted to apologize. He said Sharon had been acting without board approval, and the board was conducting an internal review. He said all fines and fees would be waived, and the citation would be withdrawn. I said I appreciated that, but I wanted it in writing. He said he would send a letter that afternoon. I said I also wanted the winter policy packet and copies of the board meeting minutes. He said he would include those as well. I thanked him and hung up, feeling cautiously optimistic for the first time in weeks. The letter arrived the next day. It was short and professional. It said the citation was withdrawn, all fees were waived, and the board apologized for any inconvenience. It included a copy of the winter policy packet, which was 3 pages long and said nothing about street snow placement. It also included copies of the last 6 months of board meeting minutes. I read through them carefully, looking for any mention of my citation or Sharon's enforcement actions. There was nothing. Not a single reference to special assessments, snow violations, or inspection policies. Sharon had been operating completely off the books. I called the board president back and asked if the board knew Sharon had been issuing citations and collecting fees without approval. He said they were just finding out. I asked if they knew she had threatened inspections and filed a small claims case. He said no, and he was very concerned. I asked what the board planned to do. He said they were meeting with their attorney to discuss next steps. I said I wanted to be notified of any actions taken, because I had already filed a formal complaint with the city and I was considering a harassment claim. He said he understood, and he would keep me informed. That night, I got a call from Marcus at Code Enforcement. He said he had received a call from the HOA attorney asking about the emails he had sent me. He said he told the attorney exactly what he told me, that the HOA had no authority over street snow placement and any citations related to public right-of-way were invalid. He said the attorney thanked him and hung up. Marcus said it sounded like the HOA was trying to cover their tracks, and I should be ready for them to push back. I thanked him and told him I was already preparing for the next round. The next round came 2 days later, in the form of a surprise small claims filing. I got the summons in the mail, along with a notice that the hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. The filing said Oak Hollow Owners Association was suing me for $400 in unpaid fines and fees, plus court costs and attorney fees. It did not mention that the citation had been withdrawn. It did not mention the board president's apology letter. It was a straight cash grab, and it was signed by Sharon as special assessment coordinator. I called my attorney immediately. He said the filing was frivolous because the citation had been withdrawn and the fees had been waived, and we could get it dismissed at the hearing. He said we should also file a counterclaim for harassment and demand attorney fees. I said let's do it. He drafted the counterclaim that afternoon and we filed it the same day. Then I sent a copy of everything to the board president and asked if he was aware Sharon had filed the case after the board withdrew the citation. He did not respond. The week before the hearing, I got another visit from Sharon. This time, she showed up with a clipboard and a camera. I was shoveling snow off my front steps when I saw her walking up the driveway. She said she was conducting a follow-up inspection to document compliance. I said the citation was withdrawn and there was nothing to inspect. She said she had the right to verify that I was maintaining community standards. I said show me the rule. She said it was in the policy packet. I said I read the policy packet and it said nothing about follow-up inspections. She said I was misreading it. I said I was not letting her on my property. She said she did not need my permission because the driveway was common area. I said the driveway was part of my unit and she needed to leave. She took a photo of me with her camera. I took a photo of her with my phone. She said I was being hostile and she was going to file a report. I said go ahead, and I walked inside. I called my attorney and told him what happened. He said it was harassment and I should file for a restraining order immediately. He said the fact that she showed up at my home after the citation was withdrawn, after I filed a complaint, and after she was put on notice by the board, showed a pattern of retaliation. He said we had enough evidence to get a temporary order, and if she violated it, she could be arrested. I said let's do it. He drafted the petition that night, and we filed it the next morning. The temporary restraining order was granted 2 days later. It prohibited Sharon from contacting me, approaching my property, or filing any further citations or fees related to the snow violation. The order was served by a deputy sheriff, who showed up at the clubhouse during business hours and handed it to Sharon in front of 3 other residents. My attorney called me an hour later and said it was done. I felt a wave of relief so strong I had to sit down. The small claims hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend organizing my binder and rehearsing my testimony. I printed extra copies of every document, highlighted the key sections, and prepared a timeline poster that showed every notice, every response, and every escalation. I also prepared a list of questions I wanted to ask Sharon if she showed up to testify. My attorney said she probably would not show because her credibility was already destroyed and the board had disavowed her actions. But I wanted to be ready, just in case. The hearing was at 9 in the morning at the county courthouse. I arrived early, dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, carrying my binder and my poster. My attorney met me in the lobby and we went over the plan one more time. He said the judge would ask the HOA to present their case first, and we would respond with our evidence and our counterclaim. He said the key was to stay calm, stick to the facts, and let the documents speak for themselves. I said I was ready. The courtroom was small and plain, with a raised bench at the front and a few rows of chairs for spectators. The HOA attorney was already there, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, sitting alone at the plaintiff's table. Sharon was not with him. The judge came in a few minutes later, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and reading glasses. She called the case and asked the HOA attorney to present his opening statement. He stood and said Oak Hollow Owners Association was seeking to recover $400 in unpaid fines and fees from a homeowner who had violated community snow removal standards. He said the homeowner had been notified multiple times and had refused to pay. He said the association was entitled to collect the fees under the governing documents. Then he sat down. The judge looked at me and asked if I wanted to respond. My attorney stood and said yes, and he presented our counterclaim. He said the original citation was issued without authority, the fees were assessed without board approval, and the homeowner had been harassed and retaliated against by an HOA coordinator acting outside her role. He said we had documentation proving the citation was withdrawn, the fees were waived, and the small claims filing was frivolous. He said we were asking the court to dismiss the HOA claim and award damages for harassment. Then, he sat down. The judge asked the HOA attorney if he was aware the citation had been withdrawn. He said he was not. She asked if he had a copy of the board meeting minutes approving the citation. He said he did not. She asked if he had any evidence that the fees were valid. He said he had the original citation and the payment demand letters. She asked to see them. He handed over a folder. She flipped through it, then looked up and asked where the rule citation was. He said it was in the winter policy. She asked if he had a copy of the policy. He said no. She set the folder down and asked if anyone from the HOA board was present to testify. He said no. The judge turned to me and asked if I had evidence to support my counterclaim. My attorney stood and said yes, and he handed her the binder with all the tabs marked. She spent the next 10 minutes reading through the timeline, the emails from code enforcement, the canceled check, the notices, and the restraining order. Then she looked up and asked if the special assessment coordinator was present. My attorney said she was served with the restraining order and chose not to appear. The judge nodded and made a note. Then, she asked if I had any other evidence. I stood and said I wanted to submit one more document. I pulled out the chain of certified letters I had sent to the HOA, showing the delivery dates and the return receipts. I said these letters proved I had responded to every notice, requested clarification on every rule, and asked for withdrawal of the citation. I said the HOA received all of them and continued to assess fees anyway. I said that was bad faith, and it was the reason I filed the harassment complaint. The judge took the letters and read through them carefully. Then she set them down and looked at the HOA attorney. She said it appeared the HOA had received clear notice that the citation was disputed, had been provided with evidence from city code enforcement that the citation was invalid, and had continued to assess fees and threaten legal action anyway. She said that was not only bad faith, it was potentially fraudulent. She asked the HOA attorney if he had any response. He said he would need to consult with his client. She said that was fine, but the court was not going to wait. She said she was dismissing the HOA claim with prejudice, meaning it could not be refiled. She said she was awarding me $800 in damages for harassment, plus court costs and reasonable attorney fees. She said the HOA had 30 days to pay. Then she banged her gavel and called the next case. I sat there for a moment, stunned. My attorney leaned over and said, "Congratulations, you won." I nodded, still processing. The HOA attorney packed up his folder and left without saying a word. I gathered my binder and my poster and walked out of the courtroom into the bright winter sunlight. Snow was piled high along the courthouse steps, and my breath fogged in the cold. I stood there for a minute, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. Then I called Marcus at code enforcement and told him the news. He laughed and said he was not surprised. He said Sharon had been pulling the same stunt with other homeowners, and the city was building a case against the HOA for repeated false claims. He said my documentation had been a huge help. I thanked him and hung up, then drove home. The snow pile near my curb was still there, exactly where I had left it, and no one had said a word about it since the restraining order was served. I parked in my driveway, grabbed my binder, and went inside. I made coffee and sat down at my desk to write a follow-up email to the board president, letting him know the court had dismissed the case and awarded damages. I said I expected payment within 30 days, and if the HOA failed to pay, I would file a lien on the association's bank account. I sent it certified mail, just like all the others. 2 weeks later, I got a check from the HOA for $800, plus an additional $300 for my attorney fees. It came with a short letter from the board president, apologizing again and stating that Sharon was no longer affiliated with the association in any capacity. The letter did not say she was fired, but it did not have to. I deposited the check and added the letter to my binder. The following month, I got a call from a detective with the county prosecutor's office. He said they were investigating financial irregularities at Oak Hollow Owners Association, and they had questions about my case. I said I would be happy to help. He came to my house the next day, a tall man in his 40s with a notebook and a badge. I gave him a copy of my full binder, walked him through the timeline, and showed him the certified letters. He took notes and asked a few follow-up questions, then thanked me and left. He said I might be called as a witness if the case went to trial. 3 months later, the local news ran a story about an HOA coordinator in Indianapolis who had been charged with theft and fraud for collecting unauthorized fees from homeowners and pocketing the money. The article did not name Oak Hollow specifically, but it described the scheme in detail. Fake citations, inflated fines, small claims filings, all designed to generate cash flow that never made it into the association's books. The article said the coordinator had been arrested and released on bond, and the case was ongoing. I recognized Sharon's photo in the thumbnail. She looked angry and defiant, even in the mugshot. I never heard from Sharon again. The restraining order stayed in place, and after the criminal charges were filed, the HOA attorney sent me a letter confirming that all records related to my citation had been expunged and my account was in good standing. The letter also said the board had implemented new oversight procedures for special assessments and fee collections, and all citations would now require board approval before being issued. It was a small victory, but it was something. The detective called me one more time, about 6 months after the initial investigation. He said Sharon had pled guilty to multiple counts of theft and fraud, and she was sentenced to 2 years probation and ordered to pay restitution to the affected homeowners. He said my case was one of the clearest examples of the scheme, and my documentation had been critical to the prosecution. He thanked me for my cooperation and said the case was closed. I thanked him and hung up, feeling a sense of closure I had not expected. That spring, the snow finally melted. The pile near my curb disappeared, and the street looked normal again. I kept my binder on the shelf in my office, just in case, but I never needed it again. The new board was professional and responsive, and I never got another citation. I still work from home, still take video calls in my spare bedroom, and I still wear my dark green puffer jacket and navy beanie when I shovel snow. But now, when I see the Oak Hollow sign at the entrance to the neighborhood, I do not feel the knot of anxiety I used to feel. I feel something closer to satisfaction, knowing I stood up to the system and won. The whole experience taught me a few things. First, document everything. Every email, every notice, every phone call, every interaction. If you do not have proof, it did not happen. Second, know your rights. The HOA is not the government, and they do not have unlimited authority. If something feels wrong, it probably is, and you have the right to push back. Third, find allies. Marcus at Code Enforcement made all the difference in my case, and I would not have won without his help. Fourth, do not be afraid to escalate. The HOA was counting on me to give up, to pay the fines and move on, but I did not, and that made all the difference. And finally, never underestimate the power of a single question. I asked for the rule citation about snow piled near the curb, and that one question unraveled the entire scheme. Sharon could not produce the rule because it did not exist. The board could not approve the citation because they never saw it. The attorney could not defend the fees because they were fraudulent, and the city code officer destroyed her at the meeting because he had the facts, and she did not. That one question, repeated over and over in emails and phone calls and certified letters, was the thread that pulled everything apart. And when the moment came, when Sharon tried to rewrite the story and claim authority she did not have, I had the proof to stop her. I had the city email. I had the board president's apology. I had the chain of certified letters showing the HOA received my cure and fined me anyway. And I had the one question she could never answer. I did not stop her at the front porch confrontation, because I wanted her on record. I did not stop her at the surprise inspection, because I wanted her to keep escalating. I did not stop her at the small claims filing, because I wanted her to commit to the lie. And when we finally got to the city code enforcement counter, when the detective and the prosecutor and the judge all asked the same question I had been asking for months, she had nowhere left to hide. The restraining order was the final piece. It prohibited Sharon from contacting me, approaching my property, or issuing any further citations. It also sent a message to the rest of the HOA board that harassment would not be tolerated. And when the criminal charges were filed, it became clear that this was not just one bad actor. It was a system that allowed bad actors to thrive, and the only way to stop it was to hold them accountable. I still live in Oak Hollow, and I still deal with the HOA on routine matters. But the dynamic has changed. The board knows I keep records. They know I have allies. They know I am willing to fight if I have to. And they know that the rules apply to them too. That is the real lesson. The rules apply to everyone, and if the HOA forgets that, it is your job to remind them. Not with anger, not with threats, but with facts, with documentation, with evidence. With a single question asked over and over until someone is forced to answer it. I asked for the rule citation about snow piled near the curb, and when no one could produce it, the whole house of cards came down. The city code officer destroyed her at the meeting, not with a speech or a lecture, but with a simple email that said the HOA had no authority. The judge destroyed her in court, not with a scolding or a fine, but with a question she could not answer. And the detective destroyed her in the prosecutor's office, not with an interrogation or a confession, but with a binder full of certified letters that proved she was lying. That is how you win an HOA fight. Not by yelling, not by hiring the most expensive attorney, but by building an airtight case, one document at a time, and waiting for the system to catch up. It takes patience, it takes discipline, it takes a willingness to do the work when everyone else is taking shortcuts. But it works. And when it is over, when the restraining order is granted, and the criminal charges are filed, and the check arrives in the mail, you do not feel triumphant. You feel tired. You feel relieved. And you feel a quiet satisfaction, knowing that you did the right thing, the hard way, and it was worth it. The snow is gone now, but the story is not. It is part of the neighborhood history, part of the whispered warnings new homeowners hear when they move in. Watch out for the HOA. Keep records, know your rights, do not let them push you around. And if they try, ask for the rule citation. Because most of the time, it does not exist. That is what Sharon learned the hard way. She thought she could rewrite the story any way she wanted. She thought the rules were whatever she said they were. She thought no one would push back. But I did. And the city did. And the court did. And the prosecutor did. And in the end, the only story that mattered was the one written in black and white, in emails and certified letters and court transcripts, with dates and signatures and proof. The plastic bin of winter rule packets is gone now. The board threw it out after Sharon was removed, and they rewrote the policy to make it public and transparent. The new packets are 3 pages long, printed on white paper, and they cite actual rules with actual section numbers. They are boring and bureaucratic and exactly what an HOA policy should be. No surprises. No gotchas. Just rules, applied fairly, with a clear process for appeals. That is all I ever wanted. Not to win, not to humiliate anyone, not to make a point. Just to be treated fairly, under rules I could read and understand. And when the HOA refused to do that, I made them. Not with anger, not with threats, but with the one weapon they could not ignore. Evidence. I still think about that moment at the city code enforcement counter, when Marcus pulled out his badge and his records and told Sharon, in front of the prosecutor and the detective and the board attorney, that she had no authority to issue the citation. I think about the look on her face, the way the color drained out of it, the way she opened her mouth and then closed it again. I think about the way the room went quiet, and the way the prosecutor made a note in his file, and the way the board attorney quietly stood up and left. That was the moment everything changed. Not the courtroom, not the restraining order, not the criminal charges. That moment, when a city employee with a badge and a file said, "No, you are wrong, and here is the proof." That was when Sharon realized she had lost. That was when the board realized they had a problem. That was when the attorney realized he had been lied to. And that was when I realized I had won. It was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no dramatic exits. Just a quiet question, a clear answer, and a room full of people who suddenly understood that the emperor had no clothes. Sharon had been issuing citations with no authority, collecting fees with no approval, and threatening homeowners with no consequences. And now, all of a sudden, there were consequences. The restraining order was granted a week later. The criminal investigation started a month after that. The guilty plea came 6 months later. And the restitution check arrived almost a year after the first citation. It was a long, slow process, and there were moments when I wondered if it was worth it. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that moment at the counter, when Marcus said the HOA had no authority, and Sharon had nothing to say. That is why I tell this story. Not to brag, not to gloat, not to make anyone feel bad, but to show that it is possible. It is possible to fight an HOA and win. It is possible to stand up to harassment and hold people accountable. It is possible to do it the right way, with evidence and patience and allies, and come out the other side intact. You just have to ask the right question, and then keep asking it over and over until someone is forced to answer. I asked for the rule citation about snow piled near the curb, and when no one could give it to me, the whole scheme collapsed. The city code officer destroyed her at the meeting. The judge destroyed her in court. The prosecutor destroyed her in the investigation. And I walked away with a check, a restraining order, and a story worth telling. It is spring now. The snow is gone, the streets are clear, and the HOA is running smoothly under new leadership. I still check my mailbox every day, still keep my binder on the shelf, still remember the rules. But I do not worry anymore. I do not look over my shoulder. I do not wonder when the next citation will arrive. Because I know, if it ever does, I will do the same thing I did before. I will ask for the rule citation. And if they cannot produce it, I will know exactly what to do.